Pleasant evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. We are going to proceed soon. Evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. The Postgraduate Institute of Science proudly presents RESCON 2021, the annual research congress. To formally start the proceedings, let us all rise to the national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, light represents knowledge, hope, and wisdom. To light the traditional oil lamp, to mark the beginning of our event, I invite the following dignitaries. The chief guest, His Excellency Holger Siebert, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Sri Lanka. The guest of honor of the day, Professor M.D. Lamavansa, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya. Thank you, sir. I cordially invite you to the head table. The esteemed keynote speaker of the event, Professor Sagarika Ekanayaka, Senior Professor in Biochemistry, University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. Professor H.M.T.G.A. Pitawala, the Director of the Postgraduate Institute of Science. Thank you, sir. I invite you to the head table. Professor W.M.T. Madhujit, the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya. Director, Professor Saluka Kodikwaku, Dean, Faculty of Science. Professor Lakshman Disanayake, the former Director of the Postgraduate Institute of Science. Former Director of the Postgraduate Institute of Science. The Chairman of PRESCON 2021. So I invite you to the head table. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Driven by science. Science begins with our unquenching curiosity to understand the grandeur of nature and the universe. Science is our collective learning, the uninterrupted flow of knowledge from one generation to the others, as we look into the future from the shoulders of giants. The Postgraduate Institute of Science, PGIS, was established in 1996 to ensure the transfer of modern scientific knowledge to the next generation. The PGIS offers master's degrees covering a majority of fields of the sciences, and it mentors MPhil and PhD students to provide their expertise to the national development, serving at research institutes around the country. PGIS has trained over 20,000 professionals through in-service training programs, short courses, workshops, and outreach activities. By the end of 2020, the PGIS has awarded nearly 3,000 PhD, MPhil, and Masters in Science degrees and over 1,200 postgraduate diplomas. Nearly 30 MSc programs in various fields of science have been introduced so far. Graduates of PGIS are working in the Sri Lankan university system and also in foreign universities. The academic programs of the PGIS are conducted through 11 boards of study, in close collaboration with the Faculty of Science, University of Peradeniya. The Board of Study in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology aims to provide a skillful, knowledgeable graduate cohort for research and industries related to molecular biology. The newest Board of Study, the Board of Study in Biomedical Sciences, aims to produce multidisciplinary researchers in connecting medicine and science. The research of the Board of Study in Chemical Sciences focuses on applying the chemical and physical properties of atoms and molecules to sustainable economic growth and industrialization. The Board of Science in Earth Sciences focuses on advancing the frontier of fundamental and applied research and disseminating knowledge on Earth Sciences realm, aiming socio-economic inspiration for society. The Board of Study in Environmental Science encompasses study in all scientific fields related to the environment, leading to understanding and resolving current environmental issues not only in Sri Lanka but also in the world. Research in the Board of Study of Mathematics focuses on applying sophisticated mathematical techniques into the study of applied sciences. The newly proposed Master of Mathematics degree will provide students an opportunity to explore the world of mathematics even further. The Board of Study in Physics focuses its research on two key areas, namely materials and physics applied to medicine. The core research areas in materials focus on the study of solar cells, fuel cells, and batteries. Diagnostic radiology, therapeutic radiology, and dosimetry are the key research aspects in physics applied to medicine. The Board of Study of Plant Science concentrates on multidisciplinary research on current topics, most recently on greening Sri Lanka, addressing the problem of urbanization and finding solutions through a green eye. The Board of Study in Science Education focuses its research on identifying issues in the teaching and learning process to enhance student learning through effective pedagogical approaches, thus enhancing the standard of science education in Sri Lanka. Research work related to the Board of Study in Statistics and Computer Science focuses on the broader areas of computer science, applied statistics, data science, and artificial intelligence and information technology, with a special focus on emerging research areas and innovative projects in the respective domains. The research students attached to the Board of Zoological Sciences dedicate their efforts to increase the scientific knowledge of our understanding about the animal kingdom. To strengthen harmony and collaboration among young researchers at PGIS, the Young Research Forum was established. It encourages students to engage in activities related both to education and social interactions. They published the Cicitator, an in-house journal highlighting their ongoing research and scientific reviews. This year, the Postgraduate Institute of Science celebrates its 25th anniversary. For 25 years, we have produced some of the best scientists who are renowned for their achievements in the country and around the world. PGIS organizes the annual Research Congress, RESCON, to provide a platform for students and scientists from institutions around the country to share their brand new research findings. For 2 days, over 180 presentations and invited speeches, we will be experiencing glimpses of scientific achievements of our Sri Lankan scientists. We proudly invite you to experience the 8th annual PGIS RESCON 2021.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that video gave an idea about the mission of the PGIS and the purpose of RESCON 2021. Now, to formally welcome the gathering, I invite Professor H.M.T.G.A. Pitawala, the Director of the Postgraduate Institute of Science.
Thank you, Dr. Aswin. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. His Excellency Holger Siebert, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Sri Lanka, Professor M.D. Lamawansa, Vice Chancellor of our university, our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dean Faculty of Science, Deans of other faculties, Directors of Postgraduate Institutes, our eminent keynote speaker, Professor Sagarika Ekanayaka, Chairman of this conference, Professor Sanath Rajapaksa, and Secretary of Conference, Dr. Aswini Amarasinghe, former directors of PGIS, members of Board of Management of PGIS, all academic members and administrative officers, all participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is great pleasure for me to welcome you all the opening ceremony of RESCON 2021. Actually, we conduct this Congress annually. However, the RESCON 2021 is a special event for us because we are commemorating this year the 25th anniversary of our prestigious institute. As one of the leading institutes in our nation, we are dedicated to postgraduate training and teaching as well as the dissemination of knowledge. This research congress clearly reflects the reputation of our institute. From the conference proceedings, you can understand that scholars from all over the country contributed to our conference. If I elaborate further, based on the research work presented at the last year research congress, we are able to release a special issue of Ceylon Journal of Science. We are now negotiating with Ceylon Journal of Science to publish another special issue incorporating papers from this RESCON as well as previously submitted articles that are still being reviewed. We have pleasure and honor of welcoming our His Excellency Holger Siebert, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Sri Lanka. Sir, please accept our heartfelt welcome to our university. Your acceptance of our invitation reflects a strong relationship of Germany with Sri Lanka. We hope that this relationship will continue forever. Professor M.D. Lamavansa, the guest of honor of this ceremony, is warmly welcome, and your participation is dignifying in this event today. We are really thankful to you for taking your time to attend this function. I am pleased to inform this audience that he is also a supervisor of our research students. I am delighted to welcome our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Madhudi, and Dean Faculty of Science, Professor Saluka Kodituaku. Actually, both of them are indeed a strength for us. I am pleased that Professor Sagarika Ekanayaka, a distinguished scholar and researcher, accepted our invitation to be the keynote speaker on this historic day. On behalf of organizers of RESCON 2021, we wish to extend our warm welcome to deans of other faculties, directors of postgraduate institutes, former directors of PGIS, members of Board of Management of PGIS, all academic members and administrative officers of PGIS as well as our university. Finally, I would like to express my highest appreciation to the team of RESCON 2021 for their diligent work. Effective leadership by Professor Sanath Rajapaksa and Dr. Aswini Amarasinghe resulted in the success of this conference. Finally, I wish the symposium every success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The Faculty of Science of the University of Peradeniya is the institution that collaborates closely with the PGIS. From conducting lectures, supervising students, to organizing events like this, the staff of the Faculty of Science contributes a lot to the success of the PGIS. I invite Professor Saluka Kodituaku, the Dean of the Faculty of Science, to share a few words with us.
Good afternoon, everybody. The chief guest of the day, His Excellency, the Ambassador of Germany to Sri Lanka, our guest of honor, Professor M.D. Lamavansa, Vice Chancellor of the University, our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Terence Majujit, Director of the PGIS, Professor Amarasuriya Pitavala, and then the Chairman of the RESCON 2021, Professor Sanath Rajapaksa, and our eminent keynote speaker, the Professor Sagarika Ekanayaka, and my fellow deans and directors of the postgraduate institutes, former directors of the PGIS, and members of the board of management, and the members of the academic staff, members of the administrative staff, and members of the non-academic staff, and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me welcome you all to the Faculty of Science, even though Director welcome you to the PGIS. PGIS and the Faculty of Science normally considered as two separate institutions, but when we talk about the research, these two institutions work hand in hand because the mainly researchers attached to the Faculty of Science as well as research students who carried out their research in scientific areas are attached to the PGIS, and mainly supervisors and then the other resource persons mainly comes from the Faculty of Science, but other faculties as well. And then I am proud to be here today, not only as the Dean of the faculty, but also as the first RESCON chairman. I can remember that at that time, the members of the coordinating committee discuss about how, at the PGIS, we assist our postgraduate students to showcase their research findings. And then we discussed that why not, as a leading institute in Sri Lanka, to initiate an annual conference or congress or something of that nature, and then finally came to this idea that okay, we will organize a RESCON, research congress for the PGIS, and that is how it was initiated. And since then, I am very happy to see the success of this congress, and we initiated, and now it has become one of the key event in the PGIS calendar. And then over the years, members of the Faculty of Science, starting from very senior dons and up to the young members, and then they work together to organize these events. Even today, in this particular RESCON 2021, professors, doctors, and then also our lecturers, and then everybody work very hard. And then frankly speaking, even though director thanks me and praise me a lot, but in my part, I gave the leadership to my staff, and then gave the freedom to come to the PGIS and carry out these activities, because as the Dean of the faculty, I consider PGIS as part of the faculty, as once again in terms of the research. And then I hope that the authors and the presenters who present their research findings at this particular RESCON, you will get very valuable feedback from eminent researchers, and then probably those feedback may be sometimes like criticism, but those are very important. Then I still remember when I read for my PhD, I was always struggling. Struggling means I didn't have any idea whether what I am doing is correct or wrong, or whether whatever I am doing would be accepted by the society or not. But presenting papers at the congresses, and then I received a lot of constructive feedbacks, and then I realized that there is some kind of value in my work, and that is how we build up. And similarly, I think these young researchers who have registered at PGIS to complete MScs, MPhil, PhD, and also young lecturers who are attached not only to the Peradeniya University but also to the other national institutions, who will get the same experience through conferences like this. And then also, I hope those researchers will improve their research career by taking such very important feedback positively and then apply them into their ongoing research work. At the same time, I would like to wish to the PGIS, because they are going to celebrate the 25th anniversary this year, and I hope the director and the staff plus members of the Faculty of Science will work hard to improve the PGIS further, and then to train more and more workforce for the country as well as the academia attached to the state universities as well as foreign students. And also I wish this concurrence a very success, and I hope you enjoy the next 2 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. For close to 8 decades, the University of Peradeniya has been at the forefront of Sri Lankan higher education. In recent times, it has transcended the boundaries to become one of the leading educational institutes of the world. With immense pleasure, I now invite our new captain at the helm, Professor M.D. Lamavansa, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya, to share his words.
A very good evening to all of you. The chief guest, His Excellency Holger Subert, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Sri Lanka. Sir, although you have been already welcomed, as the Vice Chancellor, it is my most pleasure to welcome you to this beautiful university, although it is not as old as your universities, for example, Heidelberg University, which boasts about, I think, 650 years or so. Deputy Vice Chancellor Professor Madhujit, Professor HMTGA Pitawala, Director of PGIS, and former directors, Professor S.R. Kodituakku, Dean Faculty of Science, and other deans, Senior Professor Sagarika Ekanayaka from Sri Jayawardhanapura, the keynote speaker, and the other resource persons and researchers, and Professor Sanath Rajapaksha, who has done a wonderful job. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to stand before you as the guest of honor to address the inauguration ceremony of the 8th International Conference of the PGIS RESCON 2021. As the Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya, I am grateful to the organizers and the PGIS for inviting me to grace this inaugural session. At the very outset, I wish to mark my appreciation to PGIS for executing this event despite the pandemic. I note that since the inception of PGIS 25 years ago, as an entity attached and closely linked to the University of Peradeniya, it has contributed immensely to further the field of science for the betterment of our university and society by training scientists, awarding PG qualifications through the university, of course, providing research grants, conducting research, and making available analytical facilities, keeping in line with the ethos of the PGIS and the University of Peradeniya vis-a-vis providing environment conducive for stimulating creative thoughts, free intellectual activity, and sensitive to scientific and technological needs of the society. In its endeavors of the PGIS and that of the UOP, University of Peradeniya, we have been working very closely and coherently and in an incremental manner over the last 25 years, thus helping to further each other's pursuits. That being said, however, at every time we get an opportunity like today, especially when we celebrate 25 years of existence, it is prudent to examine how much more we could do to further our interest. This especially so when we have a chief guest like the ambassador representing the Federal Republic of Germany, with whom we have established long links as a country and also a university, especially through the new endeavors and initiatives. In this regard, let me restate in summary format of what our university is all about, thanks to our international collaborators and also our in-house entities like PGIS, and using current international ranking, although we all may have justifiable concerns about the existing ranking systems and their biasness, the University of Peradeniya, as was mentioned earlier, is among the first 500 universities in the world for the 3 consecutive years, with an overall score of between 41 to 44, and this average is contributed to by 17.4 for teaching. There is room for improvement there, both for the university at large and the PG institutes. 8.4 for research, which is lower than for teaching. So that is something that we can collectively work hard. However, 100 for citation, that is a very high score, thus highlighting how valuable our research is, although small in quantity. And also this makes us among 12 high-end universities receiving 104 citations among the first 500 tiers, and 35.6 for industry income, which is fairly reasonable, and 41% for international outlook. Your Excellency, this is something that we look forward to further collaborate with Germany in general and specifically with your high-end universities for in various areas in multidisciplinary way, as we discussed about an hour ago. The next question is how to maintain what we have achieved and also to make further improvements in low-performing areas. Although the prime objective of the university is not to go after mathematical rankings, but to serve the societal needs. In this quest to improve our ranking, Mother University believes in enhancing our collaboration with PG institutes. PGIS may wish, therefore, to understand the current thinking of the university in matters related to the academic and research pursuits. The university needs to continue to work tirelessly to improve the curricula of both undergraduates and the postgraduate programs to make them more relevant, include cross-faculty course combinations, broad-based university education, and at the highest quality. Therefore, I believe there is plenty of room for us to improve in our quality culture. We also need to be cognizant of the need to produce graduates with necessary non-cognitive skills to satisfy the overarching role of the university education, including the PG education. The shift required in our research culture include creating more interaction and collaboration at faculty and institutes levels, leading to interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research, for which our university, being a comprehensive and a residential university, is well placed. Here again, I'm sure we can be kind enough to receive expertise from the country which our His Excellency represents. And we need to improve our research courses of studies at both undergraduate and the postgraduate levels, and such courses are modified with multidisciplinary inputs. Identifying new multidisciplinary research areas in the local regional context, but having national and international implications, needs to be strengthened so as to foster our ties with the community. There are some areas that University of Peradeniya and the PGIS have overlapping in their interest and could work together for the betterment of the mother university and PGIS and all the other PG institutes. For such purposes, as outlined before, the university has already taken steps to strengthen the resources of the university, including University Research Council, and in the process of taking strong steps to remove impediments to conduct research, identify research priorities for each faculty discipline, and promote interdisciplinary research, example between natural and social sciences, and share resources and encourage student research both at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. Further, the academic and research community will also experience more streamlining of the functions of the entities such as INRO, International Research Office, Munich, BLITO, and Council and Senate mechanisms for improving research, innovation, and commercialization. I invite all of you to contribute with your ideas and join hands to realize our common purpose. Finally, His Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful to the many researchers and experts who contribute to this event and organizers for holding the event under trying conditions. Thank you once again and wish you an excellent conference.
Thank you, sir. Please stay at the podium for the next event. As we commemorate our 25th anniversary, we are proud to collaborate with the Ceylon Journal of Science to give you the special edition of Ceylon Journal of Science to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Postgraduate Institute of Science. I invite Professor HMTGA Peterwelle, the Director of the Postgraduate Institute of Science, to mark the launch of this special edition by ceremonially presenting the first copy to the Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya. Please stay at the podium for the next event. Thank you, sir. Your continued support and guidance is invaluable for us. I invite Professor Sanath Rajapaksa, the Chairman of RESCON 2021, to hand over the token of appreciation to Professor M.D. Lamavansa, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya. Thank you, sir. A note on the Ceylon Journal of Science. We have to mention a few names here. A special note of thanks goes to the editorial board of the Ceylon Journal of Science, especially the editor-in-chief, Professor Lakshman Disanayake. And we also have two guest editors, Professor Namal Priyantha and Professor L.R.K. Pera. They worked tirelessly to make this event a reality. Thank you so much, sir. Now it is the time for our esteemed chief guest to address the gathering. I cordially invite His Excellency Holger Siebert, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Sri Lanka, to share his thoughts with us.
Vice Chancellor, Professor Lamavansa, University of Peradeniya, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Matejit, University of Peradeniya, Director of PGIS, Professor Peter Waller, Chairman of the RESCON Organizing Committee, Professor Rajapaksa, former directors of PGIS, deans of faculties and directors of postgraduate institutes, eminent keynote speakers, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I'm grateful for the invitation to the 2021 PGIS Research Congress. I feel pleased and honored to have been chosen as chief guest on that noble occasion. It's always so nice to come to Peradeniya. Actually, I have to tell you a secret. Maybe I shouldn't say that as a diplomat based in Colombo, but Peradeniya is so much nicer than Colombo. Maybe not today because it's raining, it's actually pouring, but I think it's not the organizing committee to be blamed for that. When thinking about the content of my speech today, I realized that I might be facing a huge challenge here. The organizing of this weekend's noble event apparently believe that an ambassador has something to say to scientists and researchers. That he can speak in front of a research congress without boring participants to sleep. Will that work as seemingly diplomats and scientists are two completely different species with hardly anything in common, with hardly anything to speak about? After having thought this difficult problem through for a while, I realized that we, scientists, researchers, and diplomats, actually we do have quite something in common. To begin with, we use a similar approach to problem solving. We are using a method based on rationality and evidence. Scientists and diplomats both have to be very prudent with premature conclusions and assessments. We had to learn to adapt to an ever-changing environment. A theory, or in my case as a diplomat, an ideology that seems sound today might be completely obsolete tomorrow. Science encourages engagement with the contrarian view, as does diplomacy. In science, there is no almighty authority, no book that governs right or wrong, and the same can be said about diplomacy. What I'm trying to establish here, there are definitely quite some similarities between our two species. Thus, diplomats may be allowed to speak at research congresses. Quod erat demonstrandum. The research and development response, ladies and gentlemen, to the COVID-19 crisis has been praised in recent months, and rightly so. Scientists and institutions have mobilized to tackle the pandemic, and they did so in unprecedented ways. However, the coronavirus has had less positive effects on the research world itself, from lockdowns of campuses and laboratories to the suspension of whole programs which have been deemed non-essential. The research world had to make significant sacrifices. Science and technology contribute to solving some of the world's most pressing problems. And it's definitely not COVID-19 alone. From mitigating the effects of climate change to improving lives of people in rapidly growing cities, challenges we face are international, and so must be the solutions. Threats posed by antimicrobial resistance don't stop at international borders. Energy efficiency is an issue that affects us all, whether we are based here in Peradeniya or in Erlangen. This is the city I come from in the north of Bavaria. No single institution can tackle these problems alone. Collaboration between research performing institutions, both domestically and internationally, is no longer optional. Institutions must harness the power of strategic partnerships with other universities, with businesses, with civil society, and even partnerships with governments might be necessary. As resources diminish and as challenges increase in complexity and in scale, cooperation becomes an imperative rather than an option. Academic research, ladies and gentlemen, academic research is becoming ever more international. Whether it is to gain access to specialized equipment, to develop new ideas, or to tap into new sources of funding, researchers are reaching out to their colleagues around the world, and they have to do so. The lone institution is no longer a viable model for the delivery of leading science. Consider the fact that while Einstein was the sole author of the paper predicting gravitational waves, the scientific paper confirming these waves had more than 1,000 authors from around the world. The successful lone researcher definitely belongs to the past. I was talking about scarce resources. What can Germany offer? Let me begin with a somewhat sobering fact. Germany is no country postgraduate students are dreaming of. Far from that. In a survey conducted by the counseling organization Global Reach, thousands of students wishing to pursue postgraduate studies abroad were asked for their preferred destinations. Respondents included individuals from India, from Nepal, from Bhutan, from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, and from Sri Lanka. Half of the respondents revealed that they were interested in studying in Australia, followed by those opting for the UK, the US, and Canada. In that list, Germany is basically inexistent. That's something we, Germany, would definitely like to change. International academic exchange has become a pillar of foreign policy in Germany. Key partners of my foreign ministry in Berlin are, of course, the German Academic Exchange Service, the DAAD, and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. However, there are numerous other partner and funding organizations, such as Friedrich Naumann Foundation, German Research Foundation, DFG, Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, or even the German Archaeological Institute. Opportunities for foreign students in Germany are manifold. First of all, DAAD, you all know that, offers scholarships for academic exchange. There are grants for students to do their master's and PhD in Germany. Interested students are invited to visit the DAAD scholarship database for more and more detailed information. Sri Lankan universities may also invite German experts. Funding for such a resource person may come from DAAD. Currently, University of Moratuva is an example for such a cooperation. In order to strengthen scientific cooperation between Sri Lanka and German academics, the National Science Foundation of Sri Lanka and DAAD launched a joint mobility program back in 2019. This program promoted bilateral research in both countries by creating a sustainable network of Sri Lankan and German teams. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by adding a few facts about University of Peradeniya's cooperation with Germany. This university has the highest number of Germany alumni among all higher education institutes in Sri Lanka. Most of those alumni enjoyed DAAD scholarships, the second biggest group being Alexander von Humboldt Fellows. And when I last visited this noble institution here last year, I even met some of your colleagues who command German, and we had a very nice dinner together. I was so astounded that I could talk to them in German. It's always a pleasure hearing that. Every year we see applications for PhD grants and master's grants from University of Peradeniya. There are several professors who obtained their PhDs from German universities and who are currently still working at University of Peradeniya. COVID-19, I have to admit, has made things in cooperation with German institutions much more difficult. This is true. However, during 2021, 4 graduates from University of Peradeniya received funding from Germany. Those graduates are currently studying in universities of Bochum, of Bonn, of Trier, and at Max Planck Society in Berlin. Some departments in University of Peradeniya signed cooperation MOUs with German universities. Examples are the Department of Psychology and the Department of Chemistry. One such collaboration is between University of Mainz in Germany and University of Peradeniya. To name a few others, MOUs have been signed between the University of Jena and the University of Bamberg on the German side and University of Kelania on the Sri Lankan side. Technical University Dresden and University Göttingen signed an agreement with University of Colombo. What I'm missing in that list, I'm coming from Erlangen, as I said. And Erlangen is renowned for its huge university with partnerships all over the world, but no partnership so far with Peradeniya. So what we discussed earlier on is that we might look into this issue and maybe, hopefully, soon there will be a new partnership of this renowned university with my home university in Erlangen. We have also seen academics of University of Peradeniya applying for DAAD's so-called re-invitation program for former scholarship holders. Through this, former DAAD scholarship holders can go to a German university or a German research institute and continue their research work for a certain period of time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for allowing me to make use of today's opportunity to do some advertising for German-Sri Lankan academic cooperation. I am grateful for your attention, and I trust this weekend's RESCON will offer new insights to all of you, and I wish you fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Kindly remain in the podium for the next event. Sir, kindly remain on the podium for the next event. The PGIS is going stronger than ever and is leading the nation in postgraduate education in science. As we head into the digital age of education, the PGIS is proud to present its new website, ready to serve our students better. I heartily invite our chief guest, His Excellency Holger Siebert, to ceremoniously launch the new website of the Postgraduate Institute of Science.
Yes, yeah. Done.
Thank you, sir. Kindly stay at the podium. To accept our token of gratitude, I invite Professor HMTGA Pitawala, the Director, Postgraduate Institute of Science, to give the memento of appreciation to the chief guest. Thank you, sir. Now we move on to the feature of tonight. To introduce the star of the inauguration ceremony, our esteemed keynote speaker, I invite Professor Manavadevi Udugala Ganahenage, Professor in Chemistry and the Head of the Department of Chemistry, to introduce our keynote speaker of the day.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In this afternoon, I'm really excited to introduce Professor Sagarika Ekanayaka, the keynote speaker of RESCON 2021. I take this opportunity as a great privilege. I'm proud to say that our keynote speaker today was a batchmate of many of us, including the Director PGIS, the Dean Science, and the chairpersons of 3 boards of study, including me. She comes from a background of being a superintendent and a highly reputed academic institutions in Sri Lanka, and serves at several higher educational institutes across the country, not only help improve student engagement and academic activities, but also to uplift the high quality research in Sri Lanka. The reason why we brought her out today to speak to you is because of the results that she has provided and created in this scenario. Coupled with an impressive background, it is not therefore surprising that she became a devoted and renowned scientist in Sri Lanka. Sagarika Ekanayaka is a senior professor in biochemistry at the University of Sri Jawadhanapura, Sri Lanka. She graduated from University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka with a BSc Special Degree in Chemistry from the same batch that I graduated, and obtained her PhD in Applied Nutrition and Food Chemistry from the University of Lund, Sweden in 2005. Her fields of expertise include food chemistry, biochemistry, and applied nutrition. Professor Sagarika is an eminent researcher in various fields with over 55 publications in peer-reviewed indexed journals and more than 200 communications, including presentations at international and national conferences and scientific organizations. Her research has been recognized with many prestigious awards such as Presidential Awards, NRC Merit Awards, and University of Sri Jawadhanapura Vice Chancellor Award for Research. Her current research includes studies on nutritional value and glycemic response of traditional Sri Lankan rice varieties, proximate and functional properties of composite flours, and nanocomposites and bioactivities. As an academic, Professor Ekanayaka has been active as an administrator as well as a supervisor. She served as the head of the Department of Biochemistry in the Faculty of Medicine, University of Sri Jawadhanapura from 2011 to 2013. She has advised 6 PhD candidates, more than 15 MPhil and MSc candidates, and numerous undergraduates. Furthermore, she was the president of the Institute of Chemistry, Ceylon, and the dean of the College of Chemical Sciences from 2019 to 2020. Professor Ekanayaka is one of the most eminent scientists in Sri Lanka and has received more than 15 prestigious research grants by now. Moreover, she has been cited among the leading professionals of the world and top 100 educators by International Biographical Center in Cambridge, England in 2014. After all, I can proudly say our keynote speaker today is a living inspiration to both the graduate students and the staff. As the organizing committee of RESCON 2020-2021, we are honored to host Professor Sagarika Ekanayaka as the keynote speaker of the inauguration ceremony today. With that, I ask that you give your full attention to Professor Sagarika Ekanayaka, and please join me in welcoming her to the stage. So it's over to you, Professor Sagarika.
Thank you, Professor Manas Devi, my Bashi, in other words, for that very kind introduction. I hope I will be able to do justice to the introduction you gave. The chief guest, His Excellency, Mr. Holger Siebert, Ambassador, the Republic Germany of Sri Lanka, to Sri Lanka, the Vice Chancellor of University of Peradeniya, the guest of honor, Professor M.D. Lamavansa, the Director of Postgraduate Institute of Science, Professor HMTGA Pitavella, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor T. Madhujit, the members of the Board of Postgraduate Institute of Science, Professor Saluka Kodituaku, Dean, Faculty of Science, Chairman, Professor Sanath Rajapaksha, Chairperson, RESCON Congress, and the members of the organizing committee, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me congratulate the Postgraduate Institute of Science on its 25th anniversary, and I hope the Postgraduate Institute of Science will go from strength to strength. So to start off, first and foremost, for me, I consider the invitation to deliver the keynote address at this inaugural session of RESCON 2021 of PGIS, the University of Peradeniya, as an honor due to many reasons. Few were mentioned by Professor Manavadevi, main being Department of Chemistry, Faculty of Science, University of Peradeniya is where the foundation for my academic and research career was laid. The realization of the immense contribution made during the undergraduate career, taught many things by wonderful teachers, actually started to set in only once I started my postgraduate work and my research career. So I consider it to be wonderful and an honor to be back at my alma mater and share some information related to our country, which we have also helped to generate with all of you today. So my title, the title I chose today is Sri Lankan Traditional Rice as a source of nutrients and a panacea for controlling glycemia. This title I chose because there is renewed interest in traditional rice varieties of Sri Lanka, and there have been much work done by many researchers just to highlight some of this work, because these rice varieties, the work have highlighted these rice varieties as a good source of nutrients and also maybe as a solution to controlling the blood sugar levels, in reducing obesity, or in addressing the non-communicable disease prevalence in our country. It is hoped my presentation today will demonstrate that Sri Lankan traditional rice consumption can be a healthy choice for anyone. I will elaborate on the nutrients in traditional rice, the glycemic responses, the blood glucose response, and also the effect of processing and cooking on the nutrients and the glycemic response of Sri Lankan traditional varieties. To start off, traditional rice farming is considered as environmentally friendly, economically viable, and sustainable, as these varieties can tolerate biotic stressors, pests, diseases, and they can be cultivated under natural environment. In addition, these varieties possess unique nutritional and medicinal properties as evidenced by our indigenous medical practice. They are used as porridge, as we all know, either with rice alone or in combination with herbal extracts as remedy for a variety of ailments. An increasing trend in traditional rice is seen these days, in recent years actually, which can be clearly seen by the increased availability of traditional rice varieties in Sri Lankan markets, and also the many numerous outlets that are propping up everywhere selling these traditional rice varieties, especially in urban areas. The renewed interest is due to many health and nutritional benefits, especially in relation to controlling or reducing the incidence of non-communicable diseases, which are highly prevalent in Sri Lanka, as can be seen from WHO data. Per capita, a little bit about rice. Per capita consumption of rice is around 315 grams per day, and rice provide a major portion of calorie, about 40%, and about 31% of protein requirement of an average Sri Lankan. In addition, rice provides us with many essential minerals, vitamins, dietary fiber, and many other substances which are needed or necessary for good health. However, we have to remember these nutrient content can vary with the processing and the variety, the processing and also the variety of the rice. Right. How is rice available in the market? Rice is available as raw whole grains, that is just dehusked, dehulled rice. Most of the traditional rice varieties are available as such, and then they are available as raw polished, where the dehusked rice is subjected to levels of polishing, where the outer layers are removed. Most of the rice varieties we eat are like this. And then there is parboiled rice, where the paddy is first steeped in, paddy is boiled or steamed and then dried and then dehulled. Sometimes they are subjected to polishing. So this parboiling process helps to retain the nutrients in the rice grain when the rice is dehulled. Some traditional varieties, I was happy to notice, are now available as parboiled rice as well. So if you look at the nutrients that rice provides us, these are the different types of nutrients which are necessary for our health and well-being. However, nutrient content will vary depending on the processing that we subjected the rice, and also the nutrient content in rice is usually expressed on dry basis. The nutrient content in rice flour is how we express the nutrients for easy comparison between different varieties. So moving on to look a little bit about carbohydrates. So carbohydrate provide us with our calories. That is the major contributor in rice eating countries. And in the laboratory, we determine carbohydrate by using different methods. We use enzymatic method that will give us the digestible carbohydrate content which is available to us. Chemical methods are used. This will express the total carbohydrate content, which will include digestible carbohydrate content as well as little bit of other carbohydrates. And also by difference, we determine the other nutrients like protein, ash, fat, moisture content, dietary fiber, and then we subtract from 100 and we take total carbohydrate as the difference. So this table summarizes the work done by the many researchers in the country, and accordingly you can see the rice data is expressed for whole grain, the traditional rice varieties. So except for 2 studies which are circled, all the other which used chemical method to determine the dietary the total carbohydrate content, other methods have used the difference to determine the carbohydrate content. So despite all these differences, the data shows us that the rice in weight, so more than 70% is carbohydrate. So reported data also reveal that cooking does not change the carbohydrate content much. Then we did some work with 16 varieties of traditional rice, but we determined that a carbohydrate as digestible carbohydrate because our final intention was to determine the glycemic index of these traditional rice varieties. So as you can see, the values tally with the value data reported. Our values change. Our value showed that digestible carbohydrate is 75 to 85%, and cooking has not affected the digestible carbohydrate content of majority of rice varieties, except for few where we saw a slight increase after cooking. Then we studied the effect of processing on traditional rice varieties by choosing 6 traditional rice varieties and processing them differently as raw, undermilled, just dehusked, and this dehusked rice portion was polished, raw polished varieties, and then a fraction was parboiled and just dehulled. We wanted to see what changes will occur in the nutrient content when they were differently processed. So as you all can see from this table, this is the effect of processing on digestible carbohydrate content. Raw undermilled rice contain, I just forgot, the digestible carbohydrate content varied between 13 to 75 to 85%, like I mentioned, and carbohydrate, if you look at the first column, the raw undermilled rice content contained lower digestible carbohydrate content compared to the second circle, that is raw polished rice. So raw polished rice, where we had the bran removed, had more digestible carbohydrate than raw undermilled rice. And then After cooking, we saw an increase in the digestible carbohydrate content in the raw polished rice varieties. As you can see in the last two columns, parboiled rice had the least digestible carbohydrate content, which decreased following cooking, and therefore these varieties, parboiled varieties, are very much suitable to be consumed if the intention is to reduce the calorie intake or to control blood sugar. This graph illustrates the digestible carbohydrate content in an edible portion of 100 grams of rice. That is rice as we eat. So as you all can see, the ash bars are parboiled rice. So when rice is parboiled, the digestible carbohydrate content becomes least compared to raw polished or raw undermilled rice. This is due to, basically due to the high moisture content absorbed by parboiled rice. So as you can see from this graph, the moisture content once we cook parboiled rice is about 78 to 85%. So a lot of moisture is there in parboiled rice. So the amount of carbohydrate will go down in a edible portion. Therefore, again, they are suitable for low carb diets. Moving on to look at proteins, for an average Sri Lankan, 30 to 40% of protein requirement is obtained by the rice we consume because we eat a lot of rice. And the protein of different rice varieties, reported varieties, are given here. As you can see, according to Abesekara et al., the protein, from all the data, we calculated that the protein content varied from 5 to 13%. And according to Abesekara et al., Pachiperumal, Suduru Samba, and the Banmi Dahanala had more than 13% of protein on weight basis. Therefore, consumption of these high protein varieties or using flour of these varieties in making food will help in obtaining significant amount of daily protein for Sri Lankans. And most studies done on traditional Sri Lankan rice reported that traditional rice varieties contain more protein compared to the improved varieties we usually consume. So the protein contents in the 16 rice varieties we studied were within the range that had been reported, but we noticed few more varieties which had protein. So Pokkali, Suwadal, Suduhinaki and Mavi varieties contained more than 9% protein on weight basis, and cooking had no effect on the protein content. When we looked at the effect of processing on the protein content, as you can see, raw undermilled rice and parboiled rice had the highest amount of protein, whereas raw polished rice had least protein. This is because we removed the bran which contained the protein, so the protein content goes down. So this study illustrated clearly that raw undermilled or parboiled rice is good if your intention is to increase the protein intake. However, when we consider an edible portion, a cooked rice portion, this is the amount of protein present in rice. It is less than 3.8% in a portion that we usually consume. So cooked raw undermilled rice contained most protein, but it was only 3.8%. And then parboiled rice contained least amount of digestible protein content. But the difference, as you can see, was very, very low between raw polished, raw undermilled and parboiled rice compared to the difference we observed in carbohydrate. Right. So moving on to look at fats and fatty acid contribution. Fats contribute about 3% of our dietary fat intake. And usually if you take the rice grain, the outer layers of the rice grain contain fat. And bran contains about 20% of fat. So this table summarizes the data on reported fat content. And most of these methods have used a method called Soxhlet method where heating is involved. So some fat may get reduced when you use heat. However, according to all these studies, traditional varieties had about 1.5 to 4% fat content, with Suduru Samba variety resulting a very high value. Right, when we studied the 16 different rice varieties, we used a method without heating. Then of course, the fat content was high. We obtained about 4 to 6% fat in the rice varieties, and some of the varieties which reported low fat earlier reported higher values when we did our study. So in summary, raw undermilled rice, that is only dehusked rice, will contain high fat, about 1.5 to 6%. Suandal Kurulutuda and Suduhina varieties contain the highest amount. Some studies say that white rice varieties contained more fat than red varieties, but we did not observe that in our study. There was a slight reduction in fat due to cooking, probably because due to washing away of the bran a little bit. However, like carb protein, the fat in cooked rice was very, very less because of the moisture. It is usually less than 2%. Right. When we looked at the effect of processing on the fat content, both raw polished varieties had, as you all can see, the least amount of fat because the outer layer was removed, so the bran and the germ is removed, so the fat content becomes least. Raw undermilled rice varieties contain high amount of fat in uncooked and cooked state, but as you all can see in the last two columns, the parboiled rice contain the highest fat content in rice flour. This we believe is due to the parboiling process, which allows the fat to adhere more into the inner layers of the rice grain and diffuse in and interact with the starch in the pericarp, in the endosperm of the rice grain, which is not removed when the paddy is dehusked. However, in freshly cooked rice, raw undermilled rice varieties, as you all can see from the purple circle, contain the highest crude fat content, with parboiled and polished varieties having similar fat contents, as can be seen by the varieties given in the parentheses. Right. If you look at the fatty acids that we can obtain from rice, according to literature, rice bran is a very good source of mono and polyunsaturated fatty acids than saturated fatty acids. So according to Samaranayaka et al., bran oils of traditional rice varieties contained mainly three fatty acids: oleic acid, monounsaturated fatty acid, about almost 50%, and then essential fatty acid, linoleic acid, about 20 to 30%, and saturated palmitic acid, only about 20 to 25%. So when we extracted fat from rice flour, differently processed rice flour, what we observed was the same pattern. In all differently processed rice flour, we extracted the fat and they contained high oleic, followed by linoleic, which is an essential fatty acid, followed by palmitic acid. These three were the main fatty acids found in the fat of extracted rice flour. We also observe the same thing after cooking. Even after cooking, the fat of these differently processed rice varieties had more oleic, followed by linoleic, and palmitic, which is a saturated fatty acid. Right. But if you take rice flour, fatty acids present in rice flour would be least in polished rice and highest in raw and parboiled rice because they contained more fat from previous slides. And cooked, if you take cooked rice, raw undermilled rice had the highest fat content. Therefore, that will contain more fatty acids. We just calculated, as an example, the linoleic essential fatty acid requirement, how much we could obtain from by eating traditional rice. So 2 servings or 140 grams of traditional rice contributed to linoleic acid requirement, daily linoleic as such. Raw undermilled and parboiled rice varieties, by eating 140 grams, we could get about more than 10% of our daily linoleic acid requirement. But polished rice, the amount that we could get was less because the bran is removed, so the fat is removed in the raw polished varieties. Right, moving on to the next. Ash content, when we determine the ash content in rice, this is a reflection of the total minerals in rice varieties. So on average, the mineral content of different rice varieties were very low, 1 to 2% in whole grain rice. A slight decline was observed after cooking. And rice is generally not considered as a good source of essential minerals, but according to Herat et al., traditional rice varieties were found to contain high content of iron and zinc. So Kaluhinati and Suduru Samba were found to have high iron. However, according to Herat, polishing removes the bran. Therefore, these mineral contents will be removed with polishing. And also, since we are talking a lot about toxic metals in rice, 2 studies reported that arsenic, cadmium, and lead levels in traditional rice varieties were below the levels of detection. I think good news for us. Then when we looked at the mineral content of differently processed rice varieties, the cooked and uncooked effect, as you all can very clearly see, raw polished varieties contained the least amount of minerals because the outer layers are removed. Moving on to dietary fiber. Dietary fiber are plant materials that resist hydrolysis by our digestive enzymes and include many different types of carbohydrates and non-digestible carbohydrates and lignin, which is not a carbohydrate. Though not a nutrient, dietary fiber is necessary for good health, as you all are aware, and confers many health benefits to humans, such as increasing satiety and reducing our carbohydrate intake, and also reducing carbohydrate digestion and absorption and leading to lower blood glucose levels. So I took dietary fiber also under this presentation. According to the reported data, the crude dietary fiber content of traditional rice is less than 1%, but crude dietary fiber includes only a small fraction of dietary fiber, only cellulose and lignin. But then when we looked at other reported data, the total dietary fiber content, that is most of the non-digestible carbohydrates, were varied from 2 to 7% in traditional rice varieties, and Suandal, Sudu Hinati, Ratu Hinati, and Behet Hinati varieties contain high content of dietary fiber, that is more than 6% of the weight was dietary fiber. When we cooked traditional rice varieties, as you can see from these 16 varieties, we observed an increase in the total dietary fiber content. So when we cook traditional rice and when we eat, we take in more dietary fiber. So uncooked varieties had similar values reported by other scientists, and the highest total dietary fiber in raw uncooked rice was observed in Suandal as previously. And in cooked varieties, we observed Purulutuda, Pachaperumal, and Maduthavalu contained high amount of dietary fiber, more than 8%. So how did this happen? What happened to increase the dietary fiber content following cooking? This is due to development of what we call as resistant starch. When starch is heated, it becomes unavailable for, some part of it becomes unavailable for digestion. That we call as resistant starch. So when these traditional rice varieties are cooked, the resistant starch develops, and then it contributes to increasing total dietary fiber content. As you can see, this is the effect of different processing, the dietary fiber content of differently processed rice varieties. So you can see cooked varieties, which are circled in red, had high dietary fiber content compared to uncooked varieties, which are not circled. There were slight variations between varieties. So increase was highest after cooking in the parboiled rice and in the raw undermilled rice. A little bit about resistant starch. When starchy foods are subjected to heat, like I mentioned earlier, some digestible starch is converted to undigestible starch, which due to a process called retrogradation, we call this fraction as the resistant starch. Why this is important? because foods high in resistant starch lower the glycemic and insulinemic response and reduce the disease risks of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases according to reported results. So traditional varieties, reported varieties contain about 0.5 to 5% resistant starch, but both authors reported that traditional rice varieties contain more resistant starch than the normal varieties that we usually consume. So when we looked at the effect of cooking on resistant starch, we observed an increase in the resistant starch content parallel to the dietary fiber increase of this cooked rice. So varieties Pokkalu, Madatavalu, Suwandal, and Gonabaru and Kahamala had very high increase following cooking. Right. Then when we looked at the effect of processing on resistant starch of uncooked and cooked rice flour, as you all can see, in uncooked, parboiled, raw polished or raw, the resistant starch content was very, very low. But following cooking, we observed an increase in resistant starch content. The increase was highest in the parboiled rice, followed by raw undermilled rice and the raw polished. The least increase was seen in raw polished varieties. However, there was a difference between different varieties. So cooked parboiled rice had the highest amount of resistant starch, followed by raw undermilled and raw polished rice varieties. In a recent study with obese children in Sri Lanka, we demonstrated that resistant starch in rice meals contribute to decrease insulin and glycemic response after consumption. The source of resistant starch was not traditional rice, a different source, but anyway, it demonstrated that resistant starch in a meal can improve the glycemic and insulinemic response. Therefore, traditional rice are suitable to be consumed by any individual due to all the nutrients it contains and the resistant starch and dietary fiber due to the benefits these provide. As we all know, resistant starch also contribute to growth of good bacteria in the gut, the prebiotic effect, and thereby contribute to increase the glycemic response. So cooked traditional rice varieties high in resistant starch would be good in controlling the blood sugar levels. Moving on to look at antioxidant potential, because a lot of work had been done on antioxidant potential. Antioxidants are molecules that remove the free radicals from our body and reduce the oxidative stress that is associated with development of many chronic diseases. So most of the work on antioxidants have been done on bran, because the antioxidant in rice is basically concentrated in the bran of the rice. So all this work demonstrated that rice brans are good source of antioxidants, and that red traditional rice varieties are good sources of antioxidants, better than these newly improved red varieties or traditional white varieties. The compounds responsible for antioxidant activity are the phenolics present in the bran. So brands of Kaluhinati, Pachaperumal and Kurulutuda contain highest antioxidant potential according to Abhesekara et al. When we looked at the effect of cooking of these four varieties, 2 red and 2 white varieties, we saw, this is rice flour actually, not the bran, a decline was observed after cooking, and the responsible compounds were phenolic compounds present in the bran of the rice, and red varieties elicited more antioxidant potential than the white varieties we studied. Cooking reduced the content about 7 to 15% in different varieties. Effect of processing on cooking on total phenolic content. Raw undermilled rice, as obviously, contained more antioxidant potential, followed by parboiled, and the least was found in the raw polished rice. There the bran is removed. Then to move on to the glycemic responses of traditional rice varieties, where I will elaborate a little bit on glycemic index and the glycemic load of rice varieties. So to move on to that, a little bit about carbohydrate and contribution to blood glucose. Carbohydrates in the rice we eat, usually after digestion, contributes to increase in blood glucose in majority of us, blood glucose or energy. Therefore, if you control your carbohydrate quantity and the quality of the carbohydrates you eat, then we can control the blood glucose response and the energy intake and reduce development of obesity and other related complications which are common among us. So if you take glycemic index concept, this expresses the quality of a carbohydrate in our food. Some starchy foods that we eat are digested rapidly and they give rise to a higher glucose response following cooking. These type of foods are categorized as high GI foods, whereas some starchy foods we eat they are digested slowly and give rise to a lower glycemic response following cooking. So these type of foods we categorize as low GI foods. So glycemic index concepts will differentiate between slowly digestible or highly digestible carbohydrates. In other words, good or bad carbohydrate choices. So when we determine the glycemic index, I hope you all will bear with me because this is important to understand the glycemic index concept. When we calculate the glycemic index, we usually give a portion of food containing the same amount of carbohydrate and we determine the blood glucose response at different intervals. So when based on the glycemic response we obtain for the same amount of carbohydrate of different foods, we categorize them as high, medium and low GI foods. So the increase or the decrease is basically related to the quality and not the quantity because you usually use the same quantity of carbohydrates. So based on that, we categorize food as high, medium or low GI. Then that is if we consume 50 gram carbohydrate portion, but when we eat, sometimes this 50 gram carbohydrate portion can be too large for us or a too smaller portion. So how do we relate glycemic index to the portion that we eat? That is done by glycemic load. Glycemic load concept applies the glycemic index to a normal edible portion. So in other words, when we talk about glycemic load, this will give the carbohydrate load or the glycemic load in the portion of food that a person is consuming. This is calculated by using GI, which reflects the quality of the carbohydrate, and the amount of carbohydrate in our food, which gives the quantity of carbohydrate in the food. Based on that, glycemic load is also given as high, medium or low. So low GI food consumption is related with many health benefits as can be seen in this slide. And based on scientific evidence, many organizations have directly recommended or suggested the use of low GI foods in managing and controlling the glycemic and lipidemic responses and hence the development of various non-communicable diseases. So if you look at global data, usually rice is considered as a high GI food, but according to global data, there's variation from medium to high GI. And Sri Lankan studies also show the improved rice varieties that we consume, the GI is from medium to high GI, except for Nadu, parboiled Nadu variety, which elicits low GI. Other varieties elicit medium to high GI. These are the reported data on traditional rice varieties, some work done here. Low GI was reported in the variety called Vedahinati, whereas other varieties elicited a medium GI. Some of them were red, some of them were white varieties. So then we embarked to study the GI or glycemic indices of traditional rice varieties because data were not A lot of data was not available. And also we thought that GI data would also help to scientifically validate some health benefits and claims, as current popularity of these traditional rice varieties are due to many of these health benefits. So these are some of the traditional varieties we studied, to be 16 varieties actually. And each of this portion contained the same amount of carbohydrate. 50 grams of carbohydrate was found in all these varieties. So the same amount of carbohydrate in each variety will give us a comparison between the blood glucose response of these different varieties. So to move on to look at the glycemic indices, the traditional white varieties elicited low or medium GI, comparable to values related, and the glycemic load, the carbohydrate load in the portion given to GI was found to be too large, and only a medium GI load will elicit when you eat these rice portions. The amount that you eat is less than given for these portions. Then these are the red varieties that elicited medium GI among the rice we studied. Again, the normal edible portion will contain a lower glycemic load. Right, from among the red varieties we studied, Pokkali, Pachaperumal and Hatadavi, as you all can see, elicited low GI. So glycemic load, again, in an edible portion was less. What we have to remember is when we determine GI, we gave the rice portions like this with only kirihodi, gravy. But when we consume rice, we usually eat it with so many accompaniments. Then the rice portion will become further less, and the carbohydrate load that we will be taking in will become further less. So the glycemic load will be less when we eat it as a meal. Again, like all other reported data, we found there is no correlation between red and white varieties in relation to GI, even though people believe that red varieties have low GI. It is not true. Why the difference? We just thought we will look at why the difference in GI despite consuming the same amount of carbohydrate in different rice, because in different rice this is partly attributed to the difference in the amylose content. Amylose is part of the digestible carbohydrate. Amylose contributes to decrease the glycemic index of rice, being less available for digestibility. In addition to amylose, we saw a decline in the glycemic indices with the resistant starch content and also the dietary fiber content in the cooked rice. If you recall, when we cook traditional rice, both increase. Again, then high moisture content also contributes to decrease the load, the glycemic load. So as can be seen in this graph, Masuran, the top figure, had high moisture, and then Sudru Samba had the least amount of moisture, absorbed least amount of moisture when we cooked. So, but both plates contained the same amount of carbohydrate. But the people who consumed Masuran variety said that the portion was too large to be consumed, whereas Suandal says they said the portion is adequate. So this shows if you eat Masuran variety, then the amount of carbohydrate load that you will get into your body will be less. So therefore, the moisture content of rice, cooked rice, will be an important determinant in determining the edible portion and therefore the glycemic load that we take in. So these are differently processed rice portions we studied, again GI. So the first column indicates raw undermilled rice. The second one is raw polished rice. The third row is the parboiled rice. All these portions contain only 50 grams of carbohydrate. So to the GI values, effect of processing on GI was clearly seen by the results we obtained. So raw undermilled rice, that's just dehusked rice, elicited medium GI, and raw polished rice without the bran, they all elicited high GI, whereas parboiled rice elicited low GI. And also for parboiled rice, the portion of rice people could consume was less. It was a lower portion compared to the raw undermilled or raw polished rice. The same was observed in the white varieties, differently processed white varieties. Parboiled rice contained the least GI, they were categorized as low GI with low glycemic load. These are the glycemic curves we obtained for 4 varieties. As you can see, the green line is the glycemic response for parboiled varieties. Orange line is the glycemic response for raw undermilled varieties. Blue line is the glycemic response after eating for raw polished varieties. So as you can clearly see, the green line gives rise to a lower glycemic response, that is parboiled rice. Then we looked at why very low glycemic load in parboiled rice. So as you all can see, this is the portion of 2 rice varieties we gave to determine GI: parboiled rice, and this is raw undermilled rice, that is just dehusked, and this is the polished rice variety portion. So each portion had 50 grams of carbohydrate. As you can clearly see, the portion of parboiled rice, the volume was very large compared to raw polished rice amount. So when the rice portion was, and the rice portion, parboiled rice portion was considered as too large by people who ate compared to raw, undermilled and raw polished varieties. Therefore, if you consider the edible portion, the glycemic load was least in the parboiled rice variety. Right. So GL, glycemic load or the carbohydrate load, is calculated by, as you can see, the glycemic index and the amount of carbohydrate in the portion we consume. So if the edible portion or the cooked rice has more moisture, then the amount we can consume will contain less amount of carbohydrate. So when you consume parboiled rice, the glycemic index is low due to the resistant starch and the dietary fiber and the amylose in it. And the volume of the parboiled rice portion is less because it contains high amount of moisture. Therefore, when you eat parboiled rice, the load of carbohydrate that we get into our body would be much less. Therefore, parboiled rice consumption can be recommended, for example, in managing diabetes, pre-diabetes, or reducing energy intake, obesity, etc. Even in children, they would be a better choice. So moving into give you all a summary of the work. The whole grain traditional rice varieties are good sources of protein, some essential minerals and fatty acids, in addition to the major carbohydrates. And cooked raw whole grain parboiled traditional rice are sources of dietary fiber and resistant starch. Red colored raw or parboiled varieties are also source of antioxidants. And when rice is polished, the nutrient content will decrease considerably, whereas parboiling will help to retain the nutrients. Raw undermilled Sri Lankan traditional varieties elicit either low or medium glycemic index, whereas parboiled rice will always elicit a low glycemic index due to high resistant starch and dietary fiber, whereas raw polished rice varieties will elicit a higher glycemic index. And the glycemic index of these varieties were independent of the color of the rice. And when we go to look at the carbohydrate load in a portion we eat, this was least in the parboiled rice due to high dietary fiber resistant starch resulting low GI and the high moisture content. Thus, parboiled traditional rice, irrespective of variety, is nutritionally and health-wise more superior compared to raw or raw polished rice varieties, and this can be strongly recommended for individuals seeking to control their energy intake, blood glucose, and may have the chronic diseases which are prevalent in our country. And raw and parboiled undermilled rice flour, we don't use that much, but rice flour will have high potential in the development of value-added novel functional foods and nutraceuticals for prevention and dietary management of diabetes and other chronic diseases. So I hope with this presentation, I managed to give you the nutrients and the glycemic response given by our own Sri Lankan traditional rice varieties, and also may have opened up some research avenues where some of you all can work at probably the Postgraduate Institute of Science. So I will take your leave with this quote made by Hippocrates 400 BC, but I think it is still valid to this day. Right. Finally, to a pleasant task, I like to offer my sincere thanks to Professor HMTGA Pitavela, my batchmate, Director, Postgraduate Institute of Science, and all the board members of the Postgraduate Institute of Science for the invitation to deliver the keynote address. And also, I have to thank Chairperson of ResCon 2021 for all the help and the faith you all had in me in inviting to deliver the keynote address as ResCon 2021. And I hope I did justice to your invitation. And all researchers who have contributed to generate this data on Sri Lankan traditional varieties. And I hope this data will popularize our own Sri Lankan traditional rice varieties. And to all of you for having listened to me for maybe closer to 1 hour. Thank you very much. And I wish Research Congress 2021 all the success in your next 3 days. Thank you very much to all of you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Madam. Kindly stay at the podium for the next event. Thank you, Madam. Thank you very much for the insightful speech on a most relevant topic to us. To present the memento of appreciation to our esteemed keynote speaker, I invite Professor Rupika Rajakaruna, the Editor-in-Chief of ResCon 2021, to the podium. Thank you, Madam. Organizing ResCon 2021 was a monumental task. With frequent closures and the pandemic affecting most part of our country, we conducted all but one meeting just online. However, we could pull this off with the support of a great team and excellent leadership. I invite Professor Sanath Rajapaksa, the chairman of ResCon 2021 Organizing Committee, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening to all of you. The chief guest, His Excellency Holger Silbert, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Sri Lanka, our guest of honor, Professor M.D. Lamawansa, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya, Professor Terence Madhujit, the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya, Professor H.M.T.G.A. Pitavela, the Director of PGIS, Professor Saluk Kodituaku, Dean Faculty of Science, all the Deans of other faculties of University of Peradeniya, Directors of other postgraduate institutes affiliated to University of Peradeniya, Professor Sagarika Ekanayaka, our keynote speaker today, former directors of PGIS, members of the Board of Management of the PGIS, all the heads of departments of the Faculty of Science, and other academic staff members, administrative staff, and non-academic staff of the University of Peradeniya as well as the PGIS, participants who witnessed the ceremony through YouTube, and other distinguished guests. On behalf of the organizing committee, it is actually a great honor and privilege for me to take the vote of thanks as the chairman of the ResCon 2021, the year which the PGIS celebrates its 25th anniversary. First of all, I would like to propose hearty vote of thanks to our chief guest, His Excellency Holger Silbert, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Sri Lanka, for gracing today's Congress. Thank you, sir, for your very interesting and thought-provoking address as well. So I wish to thank Professor M.D. Lamawansa, our Vice Chancellor, for attending as the guest of honor. Your continuous support and guidance actually helped us to organize this event despite having these COVID-19 restrictions and various other health issues. Thank you, sir. Professor Terence Madhujit, our Deputy Vice Chancellor, thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and for your participation. RESCON 2021 has brought together a rich diversity of researchers from almost all the state universities, non-state universities, research institutes, and industries to share ideas and new perspectives in a wide range of topics. Behind the success of this Congress lie the untiring efforts of our director, Professor Pitawala, who is the live wire behind the organizing of RESCON 2021. Thank you very much. So a big thank goes to our Dean, Professor Saluku Porituakku, the Dean of the Faculty of Science, for attending this occasion, as well as for all the necessary advisors, support, human resources, and infrastructure facilities provided without any hesitation. I wish to thank the deans of other faculties, directors of other PG institutes who attended today despite having a lot of engagements in their faculties and respective institutes. I am indebted to Professor Sagarika Eknayaka for the very interesting and informative keynote speech. Thank you, Madam, for accepting our invitation and coming all the way from Colombo to deal with the keynote speech. I am very happy to see the faces of our former directors of PGIS witnessing the inauguration ceremony today. I am sure, sir, you must be very happy to see this event as people who contributed immensely in building this institute since 1996. And thank you very much for your participation. I'm extremely thankful to all the members of the Board of Management of the PGIS for your participation. It is very pleasing to note that 183 research papers will be published out of more than 240 abstracts received at 29 virtual technical sessions using 4 video conferencing rooms over the next 2 complete days. So untiring efforts from Professor Rupika Rajakaruna, the editor-in-chief, and the elite editorial board, and contributions from all the reviewers with thorough and timely reviewing of the papers. It was very valuable to improve the quality of the abstracts. So I wish to thank all of them. And in addition, I should especially thank Ms. Makrina Winslow, the editorial assistant, who contributed tremendously since the receipt of the abstracts through the CMT system until the completion of the proceedings online. A vote of thanks will not be completed without making the acknowledgements to the following personnel from the Faculty of Science, University of Peradeniya. Especially to Dr. Ashwini Amarasinghe for his excellent role as the secretary, which made everything easier for me as well as for the RESCON 2021 organizing committee, and actually finally for the comparing of the inaugural session. Dr. Dilchan Beligal and his team for all the hard work of media and publicity committee. Professor Manadevi Ganayanage and her team for completing the book on PGIS research highlights. Dr. Hemalika Besundara and her team for handling all the responsibility of the virtual technical sessions. To Dr. Vajra Senivarath and his team for all the food and refreshment arrangements. To Professor Sumudru Singh and her team for registration related activities. To Dr. Chandana Jayalath and his team for logistic arrangements. And to Dr. Pumali Pereira and her team for the efforts in coordinating all the international participants. So at this moment, I must thank Dr. Chappika Bandar of the PGIS for all the arrangements for inauguration ceremony, the acting deputy bursar of the PGIS, Mr. Rashik Prasant, assistant registrars, Ms. Situmini Vijayaratna and Mrs. Shiromi Rajpura. Thank you very much for your excellent support given, and it was actually a great pleasure to work with you all. My sincere thanks go to the members of the Young Research Forum of the PGIS for their excellent support extended. I also wish to thank all the academic coordinators who will coordinate the event tomorrow and day after tomorrow for their excellent support. The organizing committee appreciates the honorary service to be provided by the session chairs for all the 29 sessions today and tomorrow and day after tomorrow. So finally, I wish to thank the staff of the PGIS, Security Division, Public Relations Office, Health Center, Maintenance Division of the University of Peradeniya, and others who helped to make this event a very successful event. The Congress would not have materialized without the financial support from the University Grants Commission of Sri Lanka, Bank of Ceylon, and the National Savings Bank. Their financial contribution is greatly acknowledged. So the thanks actually go to Sandhuni Offset Printers as well for printing both the research highlights and conference proceedings on time. At last but not least, my deepest appreciation goes to the authors who submitted their outstanding research papers, both Sri Lanka and abroad, to the RESCON 2021. I wish that the Congress will be highly stimulating, enlightening, and enjoyable to all participants who will join us through YouTube today, tomorrow, as well as day after tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for leading us from the front in accomplishing this momentous task. Ladies and gentlemen, 2021 was a remarkable year for all of us. For some, it was a year of setbacks, losses, and stalemates. Nevertheless, all of us could look back into the future and reminisce on the year 2021 as the year of resilience, grit, and hope. Thanks to science, we could hope of bouncing back from the pandemic and can look with anticipation into the year of new beginnings. And what a way to rejoice by embracing and celebrating science for 2 days in our technical sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you for the online technical sessions tomorrow and day after, where we experience the finest work of our own scientists. With that, we conclude the inauguration ceremony, letting this fruitful discussion evolve into the night, ending at the dinner at the Earls Regent Hotel, where all of you are invited. For online participants, we thank you for joining from around the world and hope to see you in person on a better day. So let us wind this glamorous occasion. Thank you.